Welcome to Assembly Calendar. I'm Mike Friesen. With us for our program today, Assemblyman Dean Murray. Dean Murray represents the 3rd Assembly District in New York State, an Assembly District that includes parts of Suffolk County. We want to thank you folks on Long Island for joining us. And Dean Murray, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
The budget's done.
How did that happen?
Who did that? And it's not only what's being described as historic in that it spends less than the prior year's budget. It was on time.
That's right. That's right. We followed through. Look at that. Maybe not quite as dysfunctional as they say.
Way to get to Albany and get things done.
That's what I'm talking about.
We've been talking, well, ever since Dean Murray got here to Albany, about the process as well as really what is, I'd say, right and wrong with what's in the state budget, but it's been mostly wrong in Dean Murray's mind, I think. So, and we're going to take a close look at this 2011-2012 state budget and see, what's here, what happened, and what kind of impact it's going to have on you folks back in the 3rd Assembly District. I think that's first and foremost what's important about any state budget.
Right. Well, one of the things we were able to do is, as you remember, the process, and last year during the process, one of the things I got up and railed about was the process itself. Not so much the budget itself, but the process. And Governor Patterson set a very dangerous precedent right now. And now our new governor, Cuomo, basically came in and said, this is my budget, and we're going to do it either my way or my way. And so, we end up negotiating back and trying to get some things put back in. And luckily, we were able to restore some of the funding for the schools. Our biggest argument in Long Island was, let's just make it fair. We understand there has to be cuts. We know that. We were pushing for it. We have to, bring the spending under control. We do have to cut and get, more efficient. But it has to be fair. And the problem was it wasn't. So, going back to the table and negotiating, what we can get back into the budget. And I think we did probably the best we could in bringing back some of the restorations for the Long Island School District and the 3rd Assembly District.
The budget process a year ago was the quintessential 3 men in a room, 3 men behind closed doors. You had the governor, the speaker, and the Senate Majority Leader, all of the same party, all from the metropolitan New York area, all saying, we can figure this out ourselves, folks, we don't need you. This year, however, we saw joint conference committees meet. We saw leaders meetings between the governor and all 4 legislative leaders. And we saw the legislative budget hearings themselves. And in fact, I want to go back to start off this program with one of those, because you addressed a fellow from the Cuomo administration who is in charge of economic development in the state. And you brought up the issue of tax incentives for businesses, and how some of them have been promised, but put off by this state, and the kind of damage that maybe that's done to the psyche, to the perception of New York State not being business friendly. I want to show a little bit of that exchange. We'll talk and we'll come back when we've listened to that and see what kind of impact that had on the final product. And we'll be back with more with Dean Murray.
My concern is earlier you had made statements regarding businesses and how they do plan ahead 5, 10 years, and the importance of the Power for Jobs program for the stability of it. But then I go back to last year when, through the Empire Zone, there were quite a few businesses throughout the state that were promised tax credits that are now being deferred. And if my numbers are correct, we're talking about $100 million in deferred tax credits in 2010-11. That number jumping up to $970 million in deferred tax credits, and then $870 million projected for the next year, again in deferred credits. Now these were tax credits that were promised by the state to these businesses that are now being pushed back. My concern is more so, I guess, the perception when we're trying to attract businesses to our state or keep businesses here. Is there that perception here? Now have we kind of put a negative perception in that you can't really trust our word? And that's a big concern of mine when we're talking about, the $200 million here, which includes $70 million in Excelsior tax credits. So again, we're saying we have $70 million in tax credits that we want to give you, but yet we've been deferring tax credits to companies that were already promised those. Where's our credibility lie?
First of all, the Excelsior tax credits are not deferred.
Right.
Okay, so, and were never intended to be deferred. Second of all, a year ago at this time, I would have had that very, very same concern. I have a year's experience almost a year post that actually happening. And it hasn't been as bad as I would have thought it might have been. So with the experience of time, it hasn't been as concerning or an outrage by the business community or working with site selectors outside the state. This, however, is a new administration. And this administration comes with its commitments. And this new administration, to my knowledge, hasn't breached any commitment as of yet, nor do I expect them to moving forward. And I think that what we're seeing here is commitments to economic development, a bottoms-up approach, a participatory role, an engaging of communities. You know, it's a lot different. It feels different, and it's brought a vitality across the state of hope and wanting to participate to take the corrective actions that are needed.
It's kind of like what you said about the governor using his position in terms of doing the right budget process. Mm-hmm. Sounds like exactly what Dennis Mullen was saying there about the governor wanting to do the right thing by the state's business community.
Right, and that's what we did this year. What happened last year with these deferred tax credits and just with the entire budget process, we continued that cycle of coming down hard on businesses, whether it be taxes, fees, mandates, regulations, everything. We solidified last year our role as the worst business climate in the country. This year, there was a concerted effort, both sides of the aisle, and with the governor leading the way, a concerted effort to turn that around and to turn that perception around. And I think we have started, you know, this is the first step in doing that. So we shall see, but so far so good.
Well, like they say with the budget itself, it's they use, a lot of times you'll hear the analogy of the steamship. You can't stop them on a dime, and you can't turn them, you can't make real sharp turns
True.
with them into the other direction. But you can slow them down,
Mm-hmm.
and you can start to make those turns. And if you keep that going with the next budget and the next set of you know, tax incentives or business incentives, then maybe you can make some real change.
Right, and I think that's what we're doing here. I think with this budget, you know, we do have the, you know, we did start taking the right steps to make that turn a little bit and start turning the ship, you know, into friendlier waters, you might say, for the business community.
And that was one of the things you've been talking about since you got elected to the state assembly. You were just working off of your own experience
Right.
as a small businessman in the state.
Right. Oh, absolutely. You know, I mean, being in the business community, I get to talk to other businesses, be it small or large, you know, and get the feedback from the businesses throughout the 3rd Assembly District and throughout the state. And, you know, again, it was a very real problem, was the perception that New York is not a business-friendly state. And what we've tried to do, and what I think we're taking the right steps here with this budget, is we're starting to make it a little more business-friendly and give that perception that, yeah, we will work with you.
And if last year you say that the legislature and the executive together continued that non-business friendly environment, what's different in this budget that just passed here that says maybe to the business community change is coming?
First and foremost, there were no new tax increases, you know, you know, period, across the board, which was great. But also, we actually stepped up some of the tax credits for businesses, and there are benchmarks set under the Excelsior program. Now, I said last year I was disappointed when we got rid of the Empire Zone and replaced it with the Excelsior program because I believed it was very much watered down, and it was. And as you saw in the clip we saw earlier, we did sweep away some of the tax credits that were promised to business. They were deferred back a little ways. This year, again, the concerted effort was made to say, no, we're gonna do this Excelsior plan. We're gonna actually ramp it up a little bit and start giving more tax credits to businesses that do follow the rules and you know what we need to get the state back on track. So it's a good first step. It's a good first step.
We saw a lot of headlines this year, of course, as it pertains to this just enacted state budget about layoffs and how the cutbacks were going to be impacting New Yorkers all across the state, all across different communities. You stood up and talked on the Assembly floor as the budget was passing about other ways that the state could make ends meet that didn't have to all be about cutbacks, and yet still be able to stay away from those new taxes that you don't want to hear and that the businesses don't want to hear about. Let's hear a little bit from Dean Murray as he spoke as the budget bills began passing here in the State Assembly, and we'll be back to talk more on today's Assembly calendar.
I echo the sentiments of some of my colleagues when I say I'm excited about the tax credits and the fact that it looks as though we are making strides and moving forward as far as making us a less business-unfriendly state. That's a good sign, but I also would say that I don't think we went quite far enough. I don't think we have taken the steps we could by thinking a little bit more outside the box. You know, government makes its money on taxes and fees. The residents of New York State have said we don't want any more taxes, and I'm pleased that there weren't, new taxes imposed here. But we can get creative in finding new revenue sources, and I'm a little disappointed in the fact that we did not include something like legalizing mixed martial arts in the state of New York, which estimates have been anywhere from $23 to $40 million in economic impact, and we're kind of turning a blind eye. I'm hoping that issue is not dead. I'm hoping we will continue to consider that, but I am saying I'm a little bit disappointed that we didn't get a little more creative and include this in there. This is a way that instead of imposing taxes and fees on all of the citizens of the state, whether they be rich or poor, this is a way we could generate revenue that's voluntary revenue. This is something where we would generate the revenue if the people wanted to spend the money. So I'm hoping that this issue is not dead because it's not included in here, and I'm hoping that we can continue the discussions and hopeful that we will be able to push this forward. But as for this piece of this bill here, I'm happy to vote in the affirmative because of the no tax increases and the tax credits. Thank you.
That mixed martial arts provision was not included in the state budget, but you continue to push for it. You think it's a creative way for the state to get things done.
Absolutely. Second fastest growing sport in the country. It's not just legalizing it and picking up a revenue source. It's opening up an industry to the state that can create jobs and quite frankly would be great for the tourism industry. So it's something we absolutely need to explore right now. But keep in mind, we don't have, and I've said this before, it's not a revenue problem. It's a spending problem. So this budget does tackle that, but at the same token, we shouldn't shy away from other sources of new revenue. I mean, it's kind of a double whammy, if you will, of attacking the problem. We can bring in some revenue without taxes necessarily, new taxes and fees, but at the same token, this budget also reins in some of the out-of-control spending.
Well, and I would suspect that if mixed martial arts came to New York State, that might be just a good thing for a lot of the other businesses that are already doing business in New York.
Absolutely.
The restaurants and the hotels, and that's the tourism industry.
Absolutely. The ancillary revenue that we can get from this is just, I think it would explode second year. First year alone, they're talking 23 to 40 million, maybe more. I think by the second, third year, that number could double.
Wasn't there one of the mixed martial arts participants on the floor of the Assembly here in the legislature
yes,
this
there
session?
Was. That's Frankie Shamrock.
He was kind of popular, if I remember that day.
A little bit, yeah.
People wanted their pictures taken and some autographs.
Wasn't such a bad guy, was he?
Maybe, maybe that's a good sign that